Hello and welcome back to Proverbs, a letter to my son. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to look at lesson 16 in the series Proverbs, a letter to my son. And we'll be using the King James translation for this study. We're going to be looking at Proverbs 31, this superwoman that women feel they can't be like. I talked to one lady just a little while ago, and I said, "What do you think about Proverbs 31? She says, "I hate that chapter." Well, what I've found is, in the past, that preachers and teachers have hammered the women that they need to be like her. Well, I'm going to show you today that you're not like her. That's no put down. It's just a frank statement. When we look at text, we need to look at the text and study and find out what it says, not what someone says about it. Notice I said what the text says. You may or may not have noticed in the past, but I've noticed that in times, good men, good preachers, good teachers, hear somebody preach or teach something and they say, "Ooh, that's good. I'm going to teach that." And they teach what they've been told, but they haven't dug into the text and find out what does it really say. Do you remember in Acts chapter 17 it says, "These were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind, and searched the scriptures daily, whether those things were so." So, do you get into the text when you read and try to find out what it really says? Do you? Well, I've finally started doing that in the last 20 years or so, and it makes a whole lot of difference. Now we're going to look at this supposed superwoman in Proverbs 31. And ladies, guys, I'm going to show you that there's no need for women of today to compare herself to this woman, because it's not apples to apples comparison. As we start into this study for this virtuous woman, I want to ask you, is the virtuous woman section a woman's idea of a good woman or a man's idea of a good woman? Well, half of the folks I asked say it's the woman's, half of them say it's the man's. Well, what is it? Let's let the text tell us what it is. Verse 1 of chapter 31, the words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. So then, this teaching is a woman's idea of a good woman. The thing here is that Lemuel recorded her teaching for posterity, for men in generations to come. So she is teaching her son, and he's not doing the teaching. He's merely recording it. So this virtuous woman section is a woman's idea of a good woman. So the words of King Lemuel, the prophecy that his mother taught him. This word prophecy, what does it mean? Well, it's translated in other verses as a burden. So her prophecy is a mother's deep, deep burden for her son's welfare. He's a good man. She knows he's a good man, and he wants him to stay a good man of character, and not ruin his life by doing things that would be disastrous. So I want to ask you, Lemuel was a king, right? Yeah. What does that make his mother positionally? Well, that makes her Queen Mother. So then, who is doing the teaching? Royalty, Queen Mother, is teaching royalty, King's son. So royalty is teaching royalty. Keep that in mind. Now, if this King Lemuel finds this woman and marries her, what does she become positionally? Well, she becomes a queen, right? So then that means that royalty is teaching royalty about royalty. Keep this in mind as we proceed, because this gives the whole text a totally different slant than I'm sure what you've heard before. So now, when we get to verse 2, it says, "What, O my son, What, O son of my womb? What, O son of my vows? And you're probably saying, what in the world was she talking about? Well, it's quite simple. My son, I'm your mother legally. I'm your mother physically. I bore you. And then, son of my vows, I'm your mother spiritually. Who has more right to advise you than me? Listen, to pay attention to what I'm saying and do what I say. I have some good advice for you. I hope you'll pay close attention. And obviously, Lemuel did, or he would not have recorded it for posterity for men and women in years to come. It took me a while to see it, but I firmly believe that verse 3 is the key verse for the chapter. And why do I say that? Many times people want to separate the Proverbs 31 woman from the first 9 verses. But let me show you something. In verse 3, it says, don't give your strength to women, or that which destroys kings. So in the same verse, he talks about alcoholic beverages. That's what destroys kings. And he talks about finding a good woman. Don't go out there and shack up with anything with a skirt. Find a good woman. So now, here's the key. She touched on both subjects in the same verse. So for my understanding, that ties the chapter together as a whole chapter content. And to look at one without looking at the other is to lose the context and, of course, lose the proper application. So we know that he's supposed to look for a good wife, but if we look back at verse 3, he's not only looking for a good wife, he's looking for a good queen. Now, ladies, we're talking about a queen, someone with servants, someone with plenty of money. And when we look at this, we say, oh, I'm not a queen. Maybe I don't need to compare myself to her. And as the farther we go, the more you'll see this. All right, as we look at the first section, verses 4 through 9, she says, don't develop a desire for alcoholic beverages. I don't want to see you become a drunk. You'd ruin your life. Besides, you're a king. You're judge, jury, and executioner in the kingdom, and people need your help. And if you're stoned out of your mind, you not only won't be able to make good decisions, you won't even know what the law is, so that you could make a good decision. Now, what's the essence of this section? It is, Lemuel, be a responsible ruler. You've got a job to do. You have responsibilities. Fulfill them and do it on a regular basis. So now, let's set the stage here. The first part of the chapter is, be a responsible man. Now, when I tried to compare my wife to this virtuous woman, deed for deed, like most people do, she fell flat on her nose. She doesn't grow a garden. She doesn't sew her own clothes. She doesn't do all these little things that we think that this woman did and our women of today should do. But when I finally started comparing her responsibility for responsibility, oh, she fared very well. But we're going to look at this woman of Proverbs 31 from a standpoint of ability and responsibility. You'll see. So let's look at her. The virtuous woman. The newer translation calls her the excellent wife. Obviously, she's a wife because she had kids. So what do we know about her? We know that Lemuel's mom is advising him find and marry a responsible woman. Now, let me ask you, before we go farther, if Lemuel was to marry a queen who did nothing but act as a figurehead, didn't lift a finger to help herself, didn't do anything at all, just sat around and did nothing, and showed up for events as a showpiece, would anybody think anything strange about that? No, that's what queens do. So when we look at the passage, Lemuel's mom is saying, Lemuel, don't get a woman like that. Find a woman that's responsible and able to do things around the castle. So this word virtuous, what's it mean? Well, Strong's defined it as one who is strong, efficient, and with excellent abilities. So this woman is this kind of woman. Watch. Her strong character, strong biblical morals, ample physical strength, good confidence, and sense of self-worth are all enhanced by her excellent abilities and her willingness to take personal responsibility for the care of the castle. All of these characteristics together make her a virtual army of one. So this is a strong woman. I think you'll find it interesting. That's the word virtuous or excellent in the newer translations. That Hebrew word is the same Hebrew word for strength in verse 2 when his mother said, don't give your strength to women. So you know what she's doing? She's saying, listen, you're a man of character, you're a man of strength, you're a man of ability and responsibility. Find a woman like you, and she will help you be the responsible ruler. So now, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever noticed what the text in chapter 31, verses 10 to 31, does not say? Think about it a minute. You know, it's important to see what it doesn't say as it is to see what it does say. Well, let's look. It doesn't say anything about love, affection, time spent with a husband, time spent with a family. Nothing. Since there's nothing relational, what we find is it is a list of her abilities and responsibilities in and around the home. And as we will see as we proceed, in its very essence, it is a shopping list for a bachelor king looking for a queen. Remember, Lemuel's mom didn't want him to find someone lazy and just wants to ride the boat and not do anything. She wants him to find someone responsible. Now, we'll go through some other things, but I want to jump right to verse 15. And the reason I'm going to do that is because, ladies, I'd like to help you to see why you can't compare yourself to this woman favorably. Watch now. In verse 15 it says, she riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth food to her household, and a portion to her maidens. Now what this sounds like in English is that she gets up at dark 30, she goes in the kitchen, slaves over the stove, cooks breakfast, sets a table, and sets her family and servants down and says, eat. Isn't that what it sounds like in English? Well, certainly it does. But look on the screen, when you look at the word portion, what's it mean? Well, it's job assignments. She's going to give her servants a portion of all the work that needs to be done in a castle. She does get up at dark 30, and she gathers all her servants around now and says, now you do the dishes, you do the dirty diapers, you take care of the food, you sweep the floors, and she assigns out everything in the castle that needs to be done. And now she's free to do all the things that she wants to do. So let me ask you, how in the world does this virtuous woman find time in the day to do all the things that she does? She has all day. Nothing's holding her back. She can do whatever her little heart desires. So this alone, ladies, should take away any sense of inferiority or guilt that you're not like her, because you're not. And that's no put down. You don't have servants. Your husband's not a king. You're not a queen. You don't have the means to do what she does. You'll notice at the end of this lesson what you can do and should do, which is more important than trying to compare yourself to this woman in this chapter. Now, I want to ask you, we're going to look at several things in the chapter. And again, it's a list of her abilities and responsibilities in and around the castle. So, what is she worth to him in and around the castle? Well, in verse 15 and 17, I'm not going to read the verses. You can go back and look at them. We're going to talk about what it's discussing there. But she's a good manager of the castle. Remember in verse 15 we just talked about, she assigns all the jobs out. And then in verse 27, she goes back and makes sure that all of these jobs get done, that they get done right, and that they get done on time. Now, what does she like to do? Well, she likes to shop. What woman doesn't? But she likes to shop for the things that she needs or that are needed around the castle, those things that to her are important. So she likes to shop. She also likes to sew. Remember now, when she was sewing, it was all by hand. She got her own material. When I say material, I mean raw material. She made her own thread. She may have made her own fabric, but she sewed everything together by hand. Now, if today's woman is going to mimic this woman exactly as she does stuff, how many women of today are going to sew their own clothes together by hand, let alone make their own thread? I mean, if you're going to be like her, you need to do it all the way. So you see how unlikely that is. So she likes to sew. She also runs a wholesale and retail business. If you look in verse 24, it says that she sews linen garments and sells them. Who's she selling them to? The public at retail. And then she makes girdles, which basically are a holster for a sword for a soldier. And one taken in battle, I understand, is really prized, but she made good stuff. She sold those girdles or holsters at wholesale to the tradesmen who go out and sell them at retail. So she does have a wholesale and retail business. Ladies, you don't need to do that either. And then she likes to exercise. She exercises so that she can do all the things that she requires of herself. What do you mean requires of herself? Well, nobody's pushing her to do these things. She does them on her own because she wants to, and she likes to. So what else does she do? She likes to garden. Does that mean that a woman of today has to have a garden to be like her? No, obviously not. But she got her garden, and she plants a vineyard, and she gets the wine from it, and she uses the income from her business to buy the property and then do the garden. And then she's willing to help the unfortunate. As best I can figure, she reaches her hand out to say, I'll help you if you'll let me. And if they don't want to, then she won't. But notice, that's about the only thing in Proverbs 31 there that is relational. Nothing about the family, but she would be willing to help the less fortunate. She also likes to feed the king meals with variety. Now, does she cook? No. Did Solomon build the temple? He said, I built the temple. Did Solomon build the temple? No. He managed it, directed it. And this woman's doing the same thing. She directs her servants and makes sure that the meals get on the table and meals fit for a king. So in that sense, she does feed her family. Verse 14 says she's like merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. So she goes out and shops to provide the cooks in the kitchen these special things for the meal that make the meal special. But she wants to find those things, and she provides those to the cooks. Now, what is her outlook on life? First, she has a genuine biblical fear of the Lord. Ladies, here's where you can emulate her belief and actions. Genuine biblical fear of the Lord. And if you'll remember, we dealt with that in lesson 2 of this series when we talked about the fear of the Lord. And she smiles at the future. She has everything set up, running smoothly, and she doesn't have to worry about anything because it's all been taken care of. She doesn't fear for her home because she's planned well. They're all clothed well, everything's set. And she feels like what she does is good and productive. Ladies, you have a lot of responsibility in a home, taking care of the family, taking care of the home. You can feel that what you're doing is important. And we'll look at that when we get to the end of this discussion. And then she speaks wisdom and teaches it in kindness. So, ladies, do you speak wisdom? Do you teach it in kindness? Do you have wisdom? If not, go back to lesson 3 and you'll see how to find wisdom. Now, that's the lady, that's the woman. So you see, she's not that superwoman. She's just a woman with good goals, good drive, and a whole lot of time. So hopefully that'll take the pressure off you ladies. Now, Lemuel's mom moves to another subject. This is why I said it's a shopping list for a bachelor king looking for a queen. Because I want to ask you, she teaches what's the basis for a marriage. Remember it says, charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but she that fears the Lord will be praised. So she's saying to her son, don't base your marriage on charm. This woman in high school who gets all the dates and the guys all want to date her, and she's with a guy for a little bit, and he thinks, boy, she's mine, and a week later she's dating somebody else. So if you base your marriage on charm, you'll find that you're not going to get to keep. So what's it say? With charm, what you see is not what you get. And then if you base your marriage on beauty, what you get is not what you can keep. What's going to happen when she gets older and that beauty fades? What do you have left? Nothing. And the marriage will likely come apart. But when you base your marriage on a woman with the fear of the Lord, notice it doesn't say anything about beauty or lack of it. But when you base marriage on a woman who fears the Lord, what you see is what you get. And what you get is what you can keep. So guys out there, you bachelors, when you're looking for a wife, don't base it on charm. Don't base it on beauty or lack of it. Base it on the fact that she loves the Lord and has a genuine biblical fear of the Lord. That'll drive everything for her. Now, once they're married, how should her husband treat her? Well, how should he? Well, he should be praising her. Good job caring for the castle, honey. Notice in verses 28, 29, and 31 that he doesn't say, good job, I love you. No, he says, good job. And the kids don't say, I love you, Mom, good job. They merely say, Mom, good job. Because remember, this is not a relational situation. Now, do the kids love her mom? Well, I suspect they do. You don't normally tell someone you don't like or don't love that they're doing a good job. But it doesn't say. So we're back to that aspect of ability and responsibility again. Now, what can we conclude about the excellent woman of today? One thing is, she cannot and should not compare herself with this queen on equal terms. You can't compare apples and oranges. They're not the same. So, for today's woman's not a queen. I don't think any of you are queens, not that I know of. So there's no need to feel guilty or inferior to this woman, because there's no sense in even comparing yourself to her. She's in a totally different social status. Now, if someone's watching this and they're a queen, well, yeah, you can do that. I doubt that's going to happen. Now, so what can the woman of today gain from this passage with reference to herself? To herself now. One is, she should have a genuine biblical fear of the Lord. If you don't have that, ladies, go to chapter 2, see the kind of studies you must engage in order to find that fear of the Lord and ultimately find wisdom. So, this fear of the Lord will drive her to be kind, to be wise, to be responsible, and compassionate. So, with reference to herself, she feels like what she does is good and productive. Ladies, you can feel that because you have your responsibility in the home. And that's a high calling. We don't want to make light of it. And then the woman of today can speak with wisdom and teach it in kindness. Do you do that? If not, then there's a goal that you can pursue. And she doesn't fear for her home because she's planned well. So your responsibilities are in and around the home. You don't have a castle. Your home is your castle to you. Yes, definitely, and rightfully so. So now, what can we learn about the woman of today from this passage with reference to her husband? Well, lady, these are things that you can do. What kind of woman should she be? Well, he should be the kind of woman he can trust with his heart. And ladies, when you fall in love with a guy and you know the Lord, that's the kind of woman you'll be. And I hope all of you can say that. He can trust you with his possessions. You're not going to spend him into the poorhouse. He can trust you to be faithful to him and not look around for another guy. And he can trust you to enhance his reputation in the church and in the community. Now, these are virtues that any woman of today could and should strive to maintain. So, lady, there's your relationship to the woman in Proverbs 31. Okay? But let's keep it in today's terms. We're not queen. Okay. Lemuel's mom is teaching a bachelor son about marriage. So, what about you bachelors out there? Proverbs 31 is a good list if all you want is a good housekeeper. But there's more. If you go to Titus chapter 2, verses 4 to 5, you're going to find a woman there that is much, much more than simply a housekeeper. Let's look. It teaches that the women should be sober. What does that mean? That means they take life seriously. Life's not a joke. It's not a big party. That teaches that the women should love their husbands and love their children. None of that is stated in Proverbs 31, so this is a good place to go. It teaches that women should be discreet. And what does that mean? Moderate as to opinion and passion. They're not hung up on different things. And discreet means careful and circumspect in one's speech or actions, especially in order to avoid causing offense or to gain an advantage. This, I think, came from dictionary.com, but I looked at several different dictionaries. So, it says they're to be chaste. Women are to be chaste. What's that mean? That means morally pure and stay that way. It teaches that they're to be keepers at home, and that's a good goal. And they're to be good. What do you mean, good? Well, kind. That's the definition there. And to be obedient to their own husbands. Why do the women do all these things? Well, the end of the verse says that the word of God be not blasphemed. So, lady, there's the kind of goal you can pursue. And don't try to do all these things that people think this woman in Proverbs 31 does in a day. I think you get the idea. And next time you go to church and you hear that someone's going to preach or teach on Proverbs 31, you don't need to say, oh, no, not that again. You can listen and you can say, I know the truth. So I hope this has helped you. I've taught it to several women and so many of them say, thank you, that takes the pressure off. And it should. So I hope it's helped you. Hope to see you in the next lesson when we wrap this study up and see the logic of chapters 10 through 29 in Proverbs. I hope you'll join me then. Thank you.